The morning light streaming through the tall windows of the Rosewood Estate's bridal suite should have felt like a blessing. Golden rays caught the crystals of my custom gown hanging on the antique armoire, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the cream-colored walls. Everything was perfect. The fresh peonies Jessica had arranged on the vanity, the champagne chilling in the silver bucket, even the way my wedding shoes sat perfectly aligned on the Persian rug. So why did I feel like I was holding my breath? "Claire, honey, you need to eat something," Jessica said, appearing beside me with a plate of strawberries and those tiny croissants the caterer had sent up. She'd been my roommate in college and knew me better than anyone, including the fact that I forgot to eat when I was nervous. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I caught my reflection in the full-length mirror and barely recognized myself. The woman staring back looked elegant, sophisticated, everything I dreamed of being on my wedding day. The gown was a masterpiece, silk crepe that hugged my curves before flowing into a subtle train with delicate beading that caught the light just so. It had taken 3 fittings and cost more than my first car, but the moment I'd tried it on, I knew. This was it. This was me, the version of myself I'd always wanted to be. But standing here now, doubts crept in like uninvited guests. Did I really deserve all this beauty, this perfect day, this incredible man waiting for me downstairs? "You look like you're going to throw up," Jessica observed, setting down the plate and moving to face me. Her bridesmaid dress, a soft blush pink that complemented her olive skin, made her look like she'd stepped out of a fairy tale herself. "Talk to me. What's going on in that head of yours?" I smoothed my hands down the front of the gown, feeling the weight of the silk, the reality of this moment. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Like what? I don't know. Everything's just so perfect. Too perfect, maybe. I turned away from the mirror, unable to meet my own gaze. Do I really deserve all this beauty, this perfect day, this incredible man waiting for me downstairs? "You look like you're going to throw up," Jessica observed, setting down the plate and moving to face me. Her bridesmaid dress, a soft blush pink that complemented her olive skin, made her look like she'd stepped out of a fairy tale herself. "Talk to me. What's going on in that head of yours?" I smoothed my hands down the front of the gown, feeling the weight of the silk, the reality of this moment. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Like what? I don't know. Everything's just so perfect. Too perfect, maybe. I turned away from the mirror, unable to meet my own gaze. Do I really deserve all this beauty, this perfect day, this incredible man waiting for me downstairs? I smoothed my hands down the front of the gown, feeling the weight of the silk, the reality of this moment. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Like what? I don't know. Everything's just so perfect. Too perfect, maybe. I turned away from the mirror, unable to meet my own gaze. Do I really deserve all this beauty, this perfect day, this incredible man waiting for me downstairs? I smoothed my hands down the front of the gown, feeling the weight of the silk, the reality of this moment. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Like what? I don't know. Everything's just so perfect. Too perfect. I turned away from the mirror, unable to meet my own gaze. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Like what? I don't know. Everything's just so perfect. Too perfect. I turned away from the mirror, unable to meet my own gaze. "You know what your problem is?" Jessica continued, settling into the velvet chair beside the window. "You've spent so much time proving yourself to everyone else that you forgot to prove yourself to you. But look around, Claire. Look at what you've built." She gestured toward the window, where we could see guests beginning to arrive on the manicured grounds below. My marketing firm's clients had sent gorgeous floral arrangements. Daniel's colleagues from the law office were chatting with my college friends. My parents stood near the rose garden, Dad looking uncomfortable in his rented tux, but proud nonetheless. You built a business from nothing. You found a man who loves you exactly as you are. You planned this entire beautiful day. Stop waiting for permission to be happy. I wanted to believe her, I really did, but as I watched the scene below, I noticed a familiar figure in navy blue moving through the crowd, her blonde hair styled in the same dramatic waves she'd worn since high school. My stomach tightened instinctively. Aaron had arrived. The bridal suite door burst open without a knock, and my sister swept in like she owned the place. That was Erin's way, taking up space, demanding attention without asking for it. She'd always had that gift, that ability to make everyone else feel smaller just by entering a room. "Well, well," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone I'd learned to dread over the years. "Look at the blushing bride." The other bridesmaids, my cousin Sarah and Daniel's sister Kate, immediately went quiet. Even Jessica stiffened beside me. We all knew that tone. Erin looked stunning, of course. She always did. The navy dress hugged her curves perfectly, her makeup was flawless, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her right to be the center of attention. At 32, she was still the golden child in many ways, the one with the sharp wit and easy charm that had gotten her through life even when everything else fell apart.
"Your dress is quite something," she continued, circling me like a predator sizing up prey. "Very elaborate. Very much." "It's beautiful," Sarah said quickly, always the peacemaker. "Claire looks perfect." Erin's smile was sharp as glass. "Oh, it's beautiful. Absolutely. Custom made, right? Must have cost a fortune." She tilted her head, studying me with those pale blue eyes that had always seemed to see straight through whatever mask I was wearing. "The question is whether you actually deserve something so extravagant." The words hit me like ice water. Not the content. I'd expected some version of this from Erin, but the timing, on my wedding day, in front of my friends, in this sacred space that was supposed to be mine. "Excuse me?" Jessica stepped forward, her voice dangerous. She'd never liked Erin, not since college, when Erin had visited and spent the entire weekend making subtle digs about Jessica's scholarship and my new friends. "I mean, let's be realistic," Erin continued, warming to her theme. "It's not like Claire's ever been the princess type. Remember when we were kids? She was always more comfortable in jeans and sneakers, hiding in the corner with her art supplies. Now suddenly she's playing fairy tale bride? It seems like such a stretch." The other bridesmaids exchanged uncomfortable glances. Kate, bless her heart, tried to redirect. "The flowers are gorgeous. Did you see the ceremony space? It's like something out of a movie." "Yes, very impressive. Though I have to wonder if all this isn't just a little much. I mean, we're talking about Claire here. Sweet, practical Claire who used to be happy with a pizza and a movie. Now she needs crystal chandeliers and silk gowns that cost more than most people's cars." She laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "You don't even deserve that gown." There it was, the knife, sliding right between my ribs where she knew it would hurt most. The room went silent except for the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I felt heat rush to my cheeks, that familiar burning sensation of shame and anger mixed together. Part of me wanted to defend myself, to list all the reasons I did deserve this day, this dress, this happiness. But that would mean admitting her words had power over me, and I'd spent too many years trying to prove I was beyond caring what Erin thought. "Excuse me?" Jessica stepped forward, her voice dangerous. She'd never liked Erin, not since college when Erin had visited and spent the entire weekend making subtle digs about Jessica's scholarship and my new friends. "I mean, let's be realistic," Erin continued, warming to her theme. "It's not like Claire's ever been the princess type. Remember when we were kids? She was always more comfortable in jeans and sneakers, hiding in the corner with her art supplies. Now suddenly she's playing fairy tale bride. It seems like such a stretch." The other bridesmaids exchanged uncomfortable glances. Kate, bless her heart, tried to redirect. "The flowers are gorgeous. Did you see the ceremony space? It's like something out of a movie." "Yes, very impressive. Though I have to wonder if all this isn't just a little much." "I mean, we're talking about Claire here. Sweet, practical Claire who used to be happy with a pizza and a movie. Now she needs crystal chandeliers and silk gowns that cost more than most people's cars? She laughed, but there was no warmth in it. You don't even deserve that gown. There it was, the knife, sliding right between my ribs where she knew it would hurt most. The room went silent except for the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I felt heat rush to my cheeks, that familiar, burning sensation of shame and anger mixed together. Part of me wanted to defend myself, to list all the reasons I did deserve this day, this dress, this happiness. But that would mean admitting her words had power over me, and I'd spent too many years trying to prove I was beyond caring what Erin thought. "Excuse me?" Jessica stepped forward, her voice dangerous. She'd never liked Erin, not since college, when Erin had visited and spent the entire weekend making subtle digs about Jessica's scholarship and my new friends. "I mean, let's be realistic," Erin continued, warming to her theme. "It's not like Claire's ever been the princess type. Remember when we were kids? She was always more comfortable in jeans and sneakers, hiding in the corner with her art supplies. Now suddenly she's playing fairy tale bride. It seems like such a stretch." "I think you should go," Jessica said quietly, her voice deadly calm. "Why? We're family. I'm just being honest." Erin's eyes never left mine. Someone should tell her that playing princess for a day doesn't actually make you one. I forced my voice to stay steady, even as my hands shook slightly at my sides. "Thank you for sharing your opinion, Erin. Now, if you'll excuse us, I need to finish getting ready." She smiled that sharp smile again, satisfied that her arrow had found its target. Of course, wouldn't want to keep Prince Charming waiting. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Claire, try not to trip walking down the aisle. The gown's train is awfully long for someone not used to grandeur." The door clicked shut behind us, leaving the rest of us in stunned silence. "What a bitch!" Sarah whispered, then immediately looked apologetic. "Sorry, Claire, I know she's your sister, but—" "No, you're right," I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. I turned back to the mirror, but the woman looking back at me had changed. The confidence was gone, replaced with doubt and that old familiar feeling of not being enough. Jessica appeared behind me in the mirror, her hands on my shoulders. "Don't you dare let her get in your head. Not today." But it was too late. Erin's words had already taken root, sprouting all those old insecurities I thought I'd outgrown. As I stared at my reflection, all I could see were the flaws. The way the dress pulled slightly across my hips, how the beading might be too much, whether I was just a regular girl playing dress-up in someone else's fairy tale. Standing there in that perfect gown, feeling imperfect and small, I was 12 years old again, watching Erin accept the trophy for most spirited at our school's awards ceremony. She'd bounced up to the stage with that radiant smile, her blonde hair catching the auditorium's lights like a halo, while I sat in the audience applauding along with everyone else. That was Erin's gift. She made everything look effortless. Academic achievement, popularity, even the way she could walk into a room and immediately become its center. I spent most of my childhood in her shadow, the quiet younger sister who was so artistic and such a hard worker, all the consolation prizes adults gave to kids who weren't naturally magnetic like Erin. I remember one particular family dinner when I was 15. I'd just gotten accepted into the regional art competition, my first real recognition for my work. I'd been so excited to share the news, practically vibrating in my seat as Mom served her famous pot roast. But before I could speak, Erin launched into a story about how Mr. Peterson, our English teacher, had asked her to tutor the struggling students because her essays were so insightful. "That's wonderful, honey," Mom had said, beaming at Erin. "You've always had such a way with words." Dad nodded approvingly. Natural teacher, that one, always helping others. When I finally managed to wedge in my news about the art competition, the response was warm but measured. "That's nice, sweetheart," Mom had said. "Your drawings have always been so detailed." Detailed. Not beautiful, not inspired, detailed. Like I was a very dedicated note-taker instead of an artist. But the worst part wasn't my parents' lukewarm response. It was the way Erin had looked at me across the table, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Art competitions," she'd said with just the slightest emphasis on art, like it was a cute hobby rather than a real achievement. "How nice for you, Claire." Even then, at 15, I'd known that Erin saw my success as somehow diminishing hers, as if there was only so much parental pride to go around, and every bit I received was stolen from her rightful share. The pattern continued through high school. When I made honor roll, Erin made sure to mention her higher GPA from the previous year. When I got into art school, she questioned whether it was really college since it was so specialized. When I landed my first job at the marketing firm, she'd asked innocently if it paid enough to live on, since creative fields were notoriously unstable. I'd told myself her comments came from a place of concern, that she was just looking out for her little sister. But deep down, I knew better. Erin needed to be the success story in our family, and my achievements threatened that narrative. The worst part was how Erin and Dad handled it. Mom, bless her heart, was a champion conflict avoider. Whenever tension arose between Erin and I, she'd smooth things over with phrases like, "Girls will be girls," or "You know your sister doesn't mean anything by it." She'd redirect conversations, change subjects, do anything to avoid addressing the growing rift between her daughters. Dad was more direct, but not necessarily more helpful. "Erin's going through a rough patch," he'd say whenever I complained about her latest dig. "She doesn't mean to take it out on you," as if my hurt feelings were less important than protecting Erin's fragile ego. The irony was that as we got older, our positions slowly reversed. Erin's natural charisma hadn't translated into long-term success. She'd bounce between jobs: marketing assistant, event coordinator, real estate agent, never quite finding her footing. Her relationships followed the same pattern: intense beginnings that fizzled out when the novelty wore off and real work began. Meanwhile, I'd built something solid. My marketing firm might not have made me rich, but it was profitable and growing. My relationship with Daniel was the kind of steady, deep love that Erin had always dismissed as boring, but secretly seemed to envy. I should have felt vindicated by this reversal of fortune, but instead, I felt guilty. Guilty for succeeding where she'd struggled. Guilty for finding the love and stability that seemed to elude her. Guilty for outgrowing the role of little sister who deferred to Erin's superior wisdom and charm. And that guilt made me vulnerable to her attacks, even now, even on my wedding day. Because some part of me, the part that was still 12 years old and desperate for her approval, believed she might be right. Maybe I was reaching too high. Maybe I didn't deserve this beautiful dress, this perfect man, this fairy tale day. Standing in the bridal suite, Jessica's hands still warm on my shoulders, I could feel that old, familiar spiral beginning, the doubt creeping in, making me question everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built. Erin's words echoing in my head: "You don't even deserve that gown." Some wounds, it seemed, took more than good intentions to heal. The garden ceremony space took my breath away, just as it had during our venue tour 6 months ago. White wooden chairs were arranged in perfect rows on either side of a petal-strewn aisle, with the late afternoon sun filtering through the oak trees overhead. The altar stood beneath a wrought iron archway, draped in cascading white roses and greenery, overlooking the estate's small lake where swans glided peacefully across the water. Our guests were settling into their seats, a mixture of Daniel's lawyer colleagues in their conservative suits, my art school friends in their more eclectic attire, and family members who represented the various threads of our intertwined lives. The string quartet we'd hired was playing Pacella's canon, the melody floating across the garden like a promise of all the beauty this day was supposed to hold. "You look absolutely radiant," Mom whispered as she fussed with my veil one last time. Her hands were shaking slightly. She'd been crying on and off all morning, overwhelmed by the reality that her youngest daughter was getting married. I can't believe this day is finally here.
Margaret Benson had always been the emotional heart of our family, the one who remembered every birthday and anniversary, who kept photo albums meticulously organized and insisted on family dinners every Sunday when Aaron and I were growing up. Seeing her so moved by this moment should have filled me with warmth, but I found myself scanning the crowd for Aaron's navy dress, wondering what fresh humiliation might be coming. Dad appeared at my side, looking handsome and slightly uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo. Robert Benson was a man more comfortable in work boots and flannel shirts, but he'd submitted to Mom's wedding day requirements without complaint. His rough carpenter's hands were gentle as he offered me his arm. "Ready, sweetheart?" His voice was gruff with emotion. Dad had never been one for flowery speeches, but the pride in his eyes said everything I needed to hear. This was one of those rare moments when his approval was completely uncomplicated, unmarked by worry about my choices or concerns about practicality. "You did good, Claire," he said quietly as we took our positions at the back of the aisle. "That boy of yours, he sees what we see. He knows how lucky he is." For a moment, the warmth of his words pushed back against the chill Aaron had left in my heart. This was my father, who'd worked double shifts to pay for my art supplies in high school, who'd driven me to every portfolio review when I was applying to colleges, who'd never once suggested I should choose something more sensible than following my creative dreams. The wedding coordinator gave us the signal, and the string quartet transitioned into the bridal march. The guests rose as one, turning to watch as we began our walk down the aisle. I could see Daniel waiting for me at the altar, handsome in his black tuxedo, his face lit up with the kind of joy that made my heart skip. His groomsmen stood beside him, his brother Mark, his best friend from law school, and two cousins who'd flown in from Seattle. Jessica caught my eye from her place as maid of honor, giving me an encouraging smile. She was flanked by Sarah and Kate, all three of them looking like they'd stepped out of a magazine in their blush pink dresses. The photographer was capturing everything, moving discreetly around the perimeter of the ceremony space. This should have been the perfect moment, the culmination of months of planning, the beginning of my new life with the man I loved more than I'd ever thought possible. But as we walked slowly down the aisle, I was acutely aware of the whispered conversations that had started among some of the guests. Word of Aaron's earlier outburst in the bridal suite had clearly spread. I could see her now, seated in the second row on the bride's side, her posture rigid and her expression carefully neutral. But there was something in her eyes, a coldness that made my steps falter slightly. As we passed her row, Aaron leaned forward just enough to catch my attention. Her voice was barely a whisper, meant only for my ears. "Hope you can pull this off, Claire. Lot of pressure, being the center of attention when you're not used to it." The words were like ice water in my veins. Dad's grip on my arm tightened. He had heard it too, and I could feel the tension radiating from him. But we were in the middle of the ceremony processional, surrounded by 100 guests and a photographer capturing our every move. There was nowhere to go but forward. I forced my smile back into place and continued walking, but Aaron's whispered barb had found its mark. Suddenly, I was hyper-aware of every step, every breath, every moment that the attention of all of these people was focused on me. Was I walking too fast? Too slow? Did I look as awkward as I felt? Was the train of my dress dragging properly, or was I about to trip and humiliate myself in front of everyone? By the time we reached the altar and Dad placed my hand in Daniel's, I was fighting not to let my inner turmoil show on my face. Daniel squeezed my fingers gently, his warm brown eyes searching mine with concern. "You okay?" he mouthed, too quietly for the microphone to pick up. I nodded, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. This was supposed to be our moment, the beginning of our forever. I couldn't let Aaron's poison ruin it. But as the officiant began speaking about love and commitment, I could feel her eyes on me from the audience, and I knew this was far from over. The ceremony was flowing beautifully. Reverend Morrison, whom we'd chosen because he'd known Daniel's family for years, was speaking about the sacred nature of marriage.
his warm voice carrying clearly across the garden. Daniel and I had written our own vows, and when it came time for him to speak, his words were everything I'd hoped for and more. "Claire," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "you came into my life when I least expected it and showed me what it means to love someone completely. Not just the easy parts, but all of it. Your ambition, your creativity, your terrible habit of leaving coffee cups all over the house." The guests chuckled softly at that. "You challenged me to be better while loving me exactly as I am. I promise to support your dreams, to be your partner in everything we build together, and to love you through whatever life brings us." I was blinking back tears as I began my own vows. "Daniel, you saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. You believed in my dreams when I was too scared to believe in them. You make me laugh, you make me think, you make me feel like the best version of myself. I promise to love you with honesty and courage, to build a life with you that's worthy of this love
We share, and to never take for granted the gift of being chosen by someone as wonderful as you." The words felt true and powerful as I spoke them, and for a moment, the rest of the world fell away. It was just Daniel and me, promising each other everything we had to give. Then Reverend Morrison began the traditional portion of the ceremony. "If anyone has just cause why these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace." It was meant to be a formality, a relic from an earlier time. No one ever actually spoke up during this part. The pause was supposed to be brief and ceremonial. That's when Erin's voice cut through the peaceful garden air like a blade. "Well, this is all very touching," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Though I have to say, it's fascinating watching Claire play the fairy tale princess. Such a departure from the practical little mouse we all grew up with." A ripple of shock ran through the crowd. Guests turned to stare, some gasping audibly. Reverend Morrison looked confused, unsure how to handle this unprecedented disruption. Daniel's jaw clenched, and I could feel the tension radiating from his body. "Erin," Mom's voice was sharp with mortification from the front row, "stop this right now." But Erin was just getting started. She stood up, smoothing her navy dress, suddenly the center of attention she'd always craved. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. It's just that watching my little sister marry so far above her station is quite impressive. From art school to landing a successful lawyer, that's quite the upgrade, Claire. Very strategic." The words hit me like physical blows. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, could see the way some of Daniel's colleagues were exchanging glances, could hear the whispered conversations starting among our guests. This was my worst nightmare. Being humiliated in front of everyone I cared about, having my motives questioned, my worthiness debated in public. "That's enough," Daniel said, his voice low and dangerous. I'd never heard him sound like that before. Controlled, but absolutely furious. "Is it, though?" Erin continued, warming to her theme. "I mean, let's be honest about what this is. Sweet, struggling Claire finding her Prince Charming to rescue her from her little marketing business. Very romantic, really. Though, I suppose signing that prenup wasn't quite as romantic, was it?" The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't quite exploded yet. Several people in the crowd inhaled sharply. I heard Jessica make a small sound of outrage from her place at the altar. "Excuse me?" Daniel's voice was ice. "Oh, come on," Erin laughed, but there was hysteria creeping into her voice now. "You don't think the family doesn't know? Claire might have fooled everyone else with this love story, but some of us can see what this really is. A calculated move to secure her future. Smart girl, our Claire. Finally learned to think like a Benson." The crowd was buzzing now, whispers and gasps creating a low hum of scandal. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the ground and never resurface. This was supposed to be about love, about commitment, about two people choosing to build a life together. Instead, it had become a circus, a public spectacle of family dysfunction and sibling rivalry.
Daniel squeezed my hand again, his touch steady and reassuring even as his anger radiated toward my sister. But the damage was done. The whispers had started, and they would follow us for the rest of the day, probably for years to come. The reception should have been a celebration. The estate's ballroom was transformed into something magical. Fairy lights strung along the ceiling, round tables dressed in crisp white linens and adorned with cascading centerpieces of white roses and greenery. The band was playing softly as guests moved through the cocktail hours, sampling past hors d'oeuvres and sipping champagne. But the atmosphere was tense, charged with the electricity that follows a public scandal. I could see it in the way conversations stopped when Daniel and I walked by, in the curious glances and quickly averted eyes. People were being kind, congratulating us, complimenting my dress, telling us how beautiful the ceremony had been. But there was an undercurrent of uncomfortable awareness that something had gone very wrong.
I'd managed to get through the rest of the ceremony after Aaron's outburst, though my hands had shaken as Daniel placed the ring on my finger. Reverend Morrison had mercifully moved things along quickly, pronouncing us husband and wife with an efficiency that suggested he wanted to get us all out of that garden as soon as possible. Now, as we moved through the reception, I was trying to play the role of the happy bride while my mind raced. How many people had heard about the prenup before today? How many were now questioning everything about my relationship with Daniel? And why did Erin's approval still matter so much to me that her public rejection could cut this deep? "Claire, honey, we need to talk." Mom appeared at my elbow, her face pinched with stress. She'd been trying to do damage control all evening, smoothing over conversations and redirecting attention away from the ceremony incident. But I could see the toll it was taking on her. "Where's Erin?" I asked, scanning the crowd. I hadn't seen my sister since we'd moved inside for the reception. "She's in the bride's lounge," Mom said quietly. "She's upset." "She's upset?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "She just humiliated me in front of everyone I care about, and she's upset?" "I know, sweetheart, I know, but she's family, and what, Mom? And I should just let her destroy my wedding day because we shared DNA?" Before Mom could answer, Erin herself appeared, moving through the crowd with that particular stride she'd perfected in high school, confident on the surface, but with an underlying brittleness that suggested she might shatter if touched wrong. "Claire, honey, we need to talk." Mom appeared at my elbow, her face pinched with stress. She'd been trying to do damage control all evening, smoothing over conversations and redirecting attention away from the ceremony incident. But I could see the toll it was taking on her. "Where's Erin?" I asked, scanning the crowd. I hadn't seen my sister since we'd moved inside for the reception. "She's in the bride's lounge," Mom said quietly. "She's upset." "She's upset." The words came out sharper than I intended. "She just humiliated me in front of everyone I care about, and she's upset?" "I know, sweetheart, I know, but she's family, and what, Mom? And I should just let her destroy my wedding day because we shared DNA?" Before Mom could answer, Erin herself appeared, moving through the crowd with that particular stride she'd perfected in high school, confident on the surface, but with an underlying brittleness that suggested she might shatter if touched wrong. "Claire, honey, we need to talk." Mom appeared at my elbow, her face pinched with stress. She'd been trying to do damage control all evening, smoothing over conversations and redirecting attention away from the ceremony incident. But I could see the toll it was taking on her. "Where's Erin?" I asked, scanning the crowd. I hadn't seen my sister since we'd moved inside for the reception. "She's in the bride's lounge," Mom said quietly. "She's upset." "She's upset?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "She just humiliated me in front of everyone I care about, and she's upset?" "I know, sweetheart, I know, but she's family, and what, Mom? And I should just let her destroy my wedding day because we shared DNA?" Before Mom could answer, Erin herself appeared, moving through the crowd with that particular stride she'd perfected in high school, confident on the surface, but with an underlying brittleness that suggested she might shatter if touched wrong. "Claire," she said as she approached, her voice artificially bright. "Lovely reception. Very elaborate.
Don't. The word came out like a warning shot. Just don't, Erin. Haven't you done enough? I don't know what you mean. But her eyes were glittering with that dangerous light I'd learned to recognize over the years. She wasn't done yet. Jessica materialized beside me, having apparently been watching for this exact confrontation. Maybe we should take this somewhere private, she suggested, ever the diplomat. Oh, I think privacy is overrated, she said with a laugh that had no humor in it. Besides, don't you think the family should know the truth about our blushing bride's fairy tale romance? What truth, Erin? I was surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. That I found someone who loves me? That I'm happy? That I built something successful with my life? Which of those truths bothers you the most? Her mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw the raw pain underneath. But then it was back, armored with spite and bitterness. The truth that you only married him to secure your precious little business, she hissed, her voice low but carrying clearly in the sudden quiet that had fallen around us. Other guests were pretending not to listen, but everyone was hanging on every word. Do you want to know about the prenup, Erin? My voice was quiet, but it carried. Daniel suggested it after we got engaged, not to protect his money from me, but to protect both of us equally, because he'd watched his parents go through a bitter divorce that destroyed them financially and emotionally, and he never wanted us to face that possibility without protection. I could see people listening now, no longer pretending to be focused on their champagne and conversation. This had become the main event of the evening, and there was no backing down. The prenup protects my business assets just as much as his, I continued. It ensures that what we each brought into the marriage stays ours, while everything we build together is shared equally. It's not about money, Erin. It's about respect and fairness and planning for a future together. How convenient, she shot back, but some of the wind had gone out of her sails. And you're going to tell me that the timing of this elaborate wedding has nothing to do with your business finally turning a real profit last year? You're right, I said, surprising her. The timing does have something to do with my business success. We waited to get married until we were both financially stable because we wanted to start our life together from a position of strength, not desperation. We wanted to choose each other, not need each other. The truth of those words rang out clearly, and I could see some of the wedding guests nodding in understanding. This wasn't the scandal Erin was trying to create. It was actually the opposite, a story of two people being responsible and thoughtful about their future together.
But Erin wasn't done yet. Her face was flushed now, her carefully applied makeup beginning to crack under the strain of her emotions. "You just can't stand it, can you?" she said, and now her voice was rising. That for once, someone else in this family gets to be the success story, that practical little Claire finally gets her fairy tale, while the rest of us... She stopped abruptly, as if realizing she was about to reveal more than she intended. "While the rest of us what, Erin?" I pressed, sensing that we were finally getting to the heart of it. While the rest of us have to watch you throw away every opportunity you've ever been given? While we have to pretend your problems are everyone else's fault? The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. The sound cracked across the room like a gunshot, and suddenly everything was chaos. Jessica lunged forward, Daniel appeared at my side, Mom was crying, and Dad was moving toward Erin with a look of fury I'd never seen on his face before. But as I stood there with my cheek burning and the taste of blood in my mouth where I'd bitten my tongue, all I could think was, finally, the truth was out in the open, where we could all see it. The real question was what we were going to do with it. The silence that followed Erin's slap was deafening. 100 wedding guests stood frozen, champagne glasses halfway to their lips, conversations abandoned mid-sentence. The only sound was the soft jazz music still playing from the band, incongruously cheerful against the backdrop of family drama. Then Daniel stepped forward, and I'd never been more grateful for his calm, lawyer-trained composure.
His hand found mine, warm and steady, while his other gently touched my burning cheek. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly across the ballroom without him having to raise it at all. "I think there's been enough misunderstanding for one evening," he said, his eyes never leaving Aaron's face. "Since my wife's family seems to have concerns about our marriage, let me address them directly." The word wife sent a little thrill through me despite everything. We were married now. Whatever else happened, that was real and true and mine. "Aaron is correct that Claire and I signed a prenuptial agreement," Daniel continued, his tone professional but warm. "What she's either misunderstood or chosen to misrepresent is the nature of that agreement. It wasn't my idea because I was worried about Claire's motives. It was my suggestion because I'd watched my parents destroy each other and their children in a bitter divorce that could have been avoided with better planning." He paused, letting that sink in. I could see some of the wedding guests, particularly those who knew Daniel's family, nodding in understanding. His parents' divorce had been legendary in their social circle, a cautionary tale about what happened when love turned to hate without legal protections. "The prenup protects both of us equally," Daniel went on. "It ensures that the business Claire built from nothing, the marketing firm that she grew through 12-hour days and weekend work, through client meetings and late-night strategy sessions, through sheer determination and talent, remains hers. Just as my law practice remains mine." His voice grew warmer as he spoke about my work, and I could feel some of the tension in the room beginning to ease. These people know me, had watched me build my business from a one-person operation to a team of 12. They'd seen the long hours, the sacrifices, the gradual climb toward success. But everything we build together from this day forward, our home, our investments, our future, that belongs to both of us equally. Because that's what marriage is supposed to be, a partnership of equals, not a rescue mission or a financial transaction. Now his gaze shifted to include the entire room, and I could see why he was so effective in the courtroom. He had that rare ability to make complex ideas feel simple and logical. "I didn't marry Claire because she needed saving," he said, with a slight smile that transformed his serious face. "I married her because she's the strongest, most talented, most beautiful woman I've ever met. Because she challenges me, inspires me, and makes me want to be the best version of myself. Because when I imagine my future, every happy moment includes her." My eyes were burning with tears, but they were good tears this time. This was why I'd fallen in love with Daniel. Not just his kindness or his stability, but his ability to see me clearly and love what he saw. "If anyone in this room thinks Claire married me for my money," he said with a slight smile that transformed his serious face, "they obviously haven't seen her tax returns from last year. She's doing just fine on her own, thank you very much." That drew a few chuckles from the crowd, breaking some of the remaining tension. I could see Jessica grinning, and even some of Daniel's more staid law colleagues were smiling. But Daniel wasn't finished. His expression grew serious again as he turned back to Erin, who was standing rigid and pale, her hand still raised as if she couldn't believe she had actually struck me. "What I find sad," he said quietly, "is that instead of celebrating Claire's success, some people seem threatened by it. Instead of being proud that she's built something meaningful with her life, they want to tear it down. And that says a lot more about them than it does about her."
The words were delivered without malice, but their impact was devastating. I could see it in the way some of the guests were looking at Aaron now, not with curiosity or confusion, but with understanding and, frankly, disapproval. Daniel had reframed the entire narrative in a few short sentences. Erin wasn't the protective big sister looking out for family interests. She was the bitter sibling who couldn't bear to see her younger sister succeed. "So, yes," Daniel concluded, "we signed a prenup because we're adults who wanted to enter marriage with honesty and clarity about our finances, because we respect each other enough to protect what we've each worked for individually, while committing to build something new together. If that threatens anyone, I'd suggest they examine their own motivations." The applause started slowly, with Jessica and a few of my closest friends, then spread through the room until most of our guests were clapping. Not for drama or spectacle,
but for the simple truth Daniel had spoken, for the idea that love could be both romantic and practical, that marriage could be both passionate and wise. Erin's face crumpled. For the first time all day, her mask of bitter confidence completely fell away, and I could see the pain underneath, raw and desperate and achingly familiar. She looked around the room at all these people who were now applauding my husband's defense of our marriage, and I realized she was finally seeing what her behavior looked like from the outside. "Erin," I started, but she was already moving, pushing through the crowd toward the ballroom's French doors that led out to the garden terrace. Mom started to follow her, but Daniel's hand on her arm stopped her. "Let Claire go," he said quietly. "This is between sisters now." But it was Mom who followed Erin outside, not me. I was still processing Daniel's words, still feeling the burn of my sister's handprint on my cheek, still trying to understand how we'd arrived at this moment of complete family breakdown at what should have been the happiest day of my life. Through the French doors, I could see the two of them on the terrace. Erin pacing like a caged animal, gesturing wildly, while Mom stood with her arms wrapped around herself as if she were cold despite the warm evening air. "We should give them a minute," Jessica said softly, appearing at my side with a fresh glass of champagne and a gentle smile. "Your mom needs to handle this." "Does she?" I asked, surprised by the bitterness in my own voice. Because Mom's been handling Erin's behavior my entire life, and look where it's gotten us. Dad materialized on my other side, his face grim. "Your sister's been heading for this breakdown for years," he said in that blunt way of his. "Your mother kept hoping she'd figure it out on her own, but some people need to hit rock bottom before they're ready to change." I watched through the glass as my mother's posture straightened, as her arms fell to her sides and her stance became more solid. Even from a distance, I could see that something was shifting in their conversation. Maybe she's finally ready to stop making excuses. God knows it's about time. Inside the ballroom, the party was attempting to resume some semblance of normalcy. The band had moved into softer background music, guests were refilling their drinks and returning to their conversations, and Daniel was moving through the crowd with his characteristic grace, smoothing over the uncomfortable moments and redirecting attention back to celebration. But my focus remained on the terrace, where my mother and sister were having what looked like the most intense conversation of their lives. After what felt like an eternity, the French doors opened and both women came back inside. Mom's face was tear-streaked but determined, while Erin looked somehow smaller than she had when she left, as if something vital had been drained out of her. "Claire," Mom said as they approached. Her voice was steadier than I'd heard her all day. "Erin has something she wants to say to you." But instead of launching into an apology, Erin just stood there looking lost. Her carefully styled hair was disheveled from her pacing, her makeup was smudged from crying, and for the first time in years, she looked like the scared little girl I remembered from our childhood. "Actually," Mom continued when Erin remained silent, "I have something I need to say first, to both of you." She turned to face the small group that had gathered around us. Daniel, Jessica, Dad, and a few close family members who had been unable to pretend they weren't watching this family drama unfold. "I owe you both an apology," Mom began, her voice carrying despite its softness. "I've spent so many years trying to keep the peace between you girls that I forgot my job wasn't to avoid conflict, it was to address it, to teach you how to handle your differences with love and respect instead of letting them fester into this poison that's been eating at our family for years." She looked directly at Erin, then at me. "I smoothed over too many fights when you were young. I made excuses for behavior that needed consequences. I praised one of you while consoling the other instead of addressing the root problems. And I let you both believe there wasn't enough love to go around, that one sister's success somehow diminished the other's worth."
"Erin," she continued, turning to face my sister directly, I failed you by not insisting you develop resilience when things got difficult. I rescued you too many times instead of letting you learn from your mistakes. And Claire, she turned to me, I failed you by not protecting you from behavior that was cruel and destructive, even when it came from your sister. Erin was crying now, quiet tears that she didn't even seem to notice. Mom, you don't have to— Yes, I do, Mom interrupted firmly, because this ends now. Today. I won't watch my daughters destroy each other over hurts that should have been healed years ago. She stepped closer to both of us, her voice dropping to that tone she'd used when we were children, and she needed us to really listen. You are both accomplished, intelligent, beautiful women who have made different choices that led to different outcomes. Erin, your struggles don't make you a failure, and Claire's success doesn't make her your enemy. Claire, your achievements don't require Erin's approval to be valid, and her pain doesn't diminish your right to happiness. The simplicity of those truths hit me like a physical force. How many years had I spent trying to prove myself worthy of Erin's approval? How much of my joy had been tainted by guilt over her struggles? There's enough love in this family for both of you to succeed, Mom concluded. There always has been. I'm sorry it took me so long to make that clear. Dad cleared his throat briefly. Your mother's right, and Erin, he turned to my sister with that direct gaze that had always cut through nonsense. What you did here today was unacceptable. You owe your sister a real apology, not because we're telling you to, but because it's the right thing to do. Erin nodded miserably, finally meeting my eyes. Claire, God, where do I even start? An hour later, after the speeches had been made and the cake had been cut, after we'd managed to salvage something resembling a celebration from the wreckage of the earlier drama, I found myself alone on the estate's garden bench overlooking the small lake. The reception was still going strong inside, but I'd needed a moment to breathe, to process everything that had happened. The evening air was soft and warm, carrying the scent of roses from the nearby garden beds. String lights twinkled overhead, creating a magical canopy that made the whole scene look like something from a fairy tale. It should have been perfect, and in many ways it was. Daniel's defense of our marriage had been everything I could have hoped for. Mom's honesty had been a gift I hadn't known I needed. The crisis had passed. So why did I still feel empty? Mind if I sit? I looked up to see Erin hovering nearby, having shed her wedding guest mask entirely. She looked vulnerable and uncertain, more like the sister I'd grown up with than the polished adversary she had become. Sure, I said, scooting over to make room on the bench. We sat in silence for several minutes, both of us staring out at the water where the swans were settling in for the night. The sounds of the party drifted through the French doors, laughter and music and conversation. But out here, it felt peaceful, almost sacred. It used to be so proud of you, Erin said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. What? The word surprised me. When we were kids, before everything got so complicated. She turned to look at me, and in the soft light I could see traces of the big sister who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my math homework. I used to think you could do anything you set your mind to. Then what happened? The question came out more plaintive than I intended. Erin was quiet for a long moment, picking at a loose thread on her dress. I got scared, she admitted. Everything came easy to me when we were young. School, friends, getting adults to like me. But then we grew up, and suddenly the things that mattered required work and persistence and qualities I'd never had to develop. And you had all of them. She paused, taking a shaky breath. Watching you succeed at things I was failing at made me feel like such a fraud, like everyone was going to realize I'd been coasting on charm my whole life and I didn't actually have any real substance. The honesty in her words cracked something open in my chest. So, you decided to tear me down instead of building yourself up? I told myself I was protecting you, she said,
but there was no conviction in it. That someone needed to keep you humble, keep you grounded. But really, I think I was just trying to make myself feel less like a failure by convincing you that you didn't deserve your success. I thought about all those years of subtle digs and backhanded compliments, all the times I'd second-guessed my achievements because Aaron had planted seeds of doubt. Do you have any idea how much that hurt me?
I do now. Her voice broke slightly. Seeing your face today when I said those horrible things? God, Claire, I've become everything I hate. The bitter older sister who can't stand to see anyone else happy? We sat with that truth for a moment. The woman next to me wasn't the confident antagonist who disrupted my wedding. She was just Erin, flawed and struggling and human. I've been so jealous of you, she continued. Your business, your relationship with Daniel, even your relationship with Mom and Dad. It always seemed like everything came together for you, while I kept making the same mistakes over and over. It didn't just come together, I said quietly. I worked 80-hour weeks for 3 years to get my business off the ground. I went through a string of terrible relationships before I met Daniel. I spent most of my 20s feeling like I was barely keeping my head above water. But you kept going. You didn't give up when things got hard. There was wonder in her voice, as if she was seeing me clearly for the first time in years. I always gave up. The first time a job got challenging or a relationship required real commitment, I'd find an excuse to walk away. And then I'd tell myself it was everyone else's fault. I turned to study my sister's profile in the dim light. Why didn't you ever talk to me about this? We used to be close, Erin. We used to tell each other everything. Because admitting I was struggling would have meant admitting you were doing better than me. And my ego couldn't handle that. She laughed bitterly. How pathetic is that? I damaged the most important relationship in my life because I couldn't stand to ask for help. The old me would have rushed to comfort her, to minimize my own success to make her feel better. But sitting there, in my wedding dress, still feeling the sting of her public humiliation, I found I couldn't do it anymore. It is pathetic, I said simply, but it's also fixable, if you really want to fix it. She looked at me with surprise, as if she expected me to argue with her or offer false reassurances. I can't pretend the last few years didn't happen, Erin. I can't pretend that having my own sister constantly undermining me didn't affect how I see myself, how I approach relationships, how much I trust my own judgment. You did real damage, and it's going to take time to repair. I know, she whispered. I know I don't have the right to ask for your forgiveness. You don't, I agreed, but I might choose to give it anyway, eventually, if you're willing to do the work to become someone worthy of it. For the first time in hours, Erin's face showed something besides pain or anger. It wasn't hope exactly, but it wasn't despair either. It was possibility. I want to be better, she said. I want to be the sister you deserved all along. I don't know how to start. I looked back toward the ballroom, where I could see Daniel talking with some of his law school friends, his face animated with laughter. My husband. The word still sent a little thrill through me. In a few hours, we'd drive away from this place together and begin our life as a married couple. Whatever happened with Erin, whatever healing or distance lay ahead, that was my future now. Maybe start by figuring out who you want to be when you're not competing with me. Find something that makes you proud of yourself, not something that makes me feel smaller. She nodded slowly. That sounds like a good place to start. We sat together a while longer, not talking, just existing in the same space without the weight of all that anger and resentment between us. It wasn't forgiveness yet, and it wasn't the close sisterhood we'd once shared. But it was something. A beginning, maybe? Or at least an end to the worst of it. When I finally stood to return to my wedding reception, Erin caught my hand. For what it's worth, you looked absolutely beautiful today.
And Daniel's right. You do deserve all of this. You always have. It was the first time in years that her praise felt genuine, uncomplicated by hidden barbs or unspoken conditions. I squeezed her fingers gently before letting go. "Thank you," I said. And for the first time all day, I meant it completely. The party was waiting for me inside, my new husband and our shared future. But first, I stood alone for a moment in the garden, feeling the weight of my sister's words and the possibility of something new growing from the ashes of something broken. Maybe this was what growing up really meant. Learning that love didn't have to be perfect to be real, that families could survive even their worst moments, and that sometimes the most important person to forgive was yourself. When I walked back into the ballroom, something had shifted. Not just in me, though I could feel that change like a warm current running through my veins, but in the entire atmosphere of the room. The tension that had been crackling through the air since Aaron's outburst had dissipated, replaced by something warmer and more genuine than the polite celebration we'd started with.
Maybe it was because people had witnessed something real. Not just the fairy tale perfection of a wedding, but the messy, complicated truth of family love. Maybe it was Daniel's eloquent defense of our marriage that had reminded everyone why we were really here. Or maybe it was simply that when you strip away all the pretense and performance, what's left is either genuine or it isn't. And what Daniel and I had was genuine. "There's my beautiful wife," Daniel said as I approached, the word wife still sending little sparks of joy through me. He pulled me into his arms and I could feel some tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying finally leave my shoulders. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly, his hand gentle on the cheek that still bore the faint mark of Aaron's slap. "Better than I expected," I said, and realized it was true. "Thank you for what you said earlier, for defending us." "I didn't defend us," he corrected, with that small smile that had first caught my attention at Melissa's party all those years ago. "I just told the truth. Though I have to admit, I rather enjoyed watching your sister realize that her dramatic revelation about the prenup actually made us look more mature and thoughtful, not less." I laughed, surprising myself. "You did seem to be enjoying yourself up there. Very lawyerly." "Well, I do love a good closing argument." He spun me in his arms as the band shifted into something slower and more romantic. Besides, someone was questioning my wife's character. I couldn't let that stand. The music swelled around us, and Daniel led me onto the dance floor for our first dance as a married couple. But this time, it felt different than it had during our rehearsal. Less performed, more real. As we moved together, I was acutely aware that this wasn't about putting on a show for our guests anymore. This was about the two of us, choosing each other, committing to build something together. "You know what I love about this moment?" Daniel murmured as we swayed to the music. "What's that?" "Everyone in this room now knows exactly what they're witnessing. Not some perfect fairy tale, but two real people who've decided to love each other anyway. Complicated families, messy histories, prenups and all." I looked around at our guests, some dancing, some watching us with warm smiles, some deep in conversation at their tables. These weren't strangers politely applauding a performance. These were people who cared about us, who wanted our marriage to succeed, who had watched us navigate our first real crisis as a married couple and seen us come through it stronger. I keep thinking I should feel different somehow, more changed, but I just feel like me. "Good," Daniel said firmly. "I married you, not some wedding day version of you, though I have to say you do look spectacular in that dress. Even after everything that happened, even with my makeup probably smudged and my hair falling down, especially then, you've never looked more beautiful than you did when you were standing up for yourself, for us, when you finally stopped letting your sister make you feel small." Jessica appeared at our side as the song ended, practically bouncing with excitement. Okay, that was officially the most dramatic wedding I've ever attended, and I've been to some doozies. But also, she grabbed my hands, her eyes bright, that was the most real moment I've ever seen at a wedding. When Daniel gave that speech about the prenup, I actually got chills. And when you finally told Erin exactly what you thought of her behavior, girl, I was so proud I almost cried. You did cry, I pointed out, noting the slight smudge of mascara under her eyes. Okay, fine, I did cry, but they were good tears, proud best friend tears. She pulled me into a fierce hug. You did it, Claire. You figured out how to love yourself enough to not let anyone else define your worth, not even family. As Jessica danced away to rejoin the party, her words echoed in my mind. Love yourself enough to not let anyone else define your worth. Is that what had happened tonight? Had I finally learned that lesson? I thought about the woman I'd been this morning, standing in the bridal suite and doubting whether I deserved the beautiful dress, the perfect wedding, the amazing man. That woman had been carrying around everyone else's opinions like stones in her pockets, heavy, unnecessary burdens that slowed her down and wore her out. But the woman I was now, standing in this ballroom in her slightly wrinkled gown with her slightly smudged makeup, felt lighter somehow. Not because the problems had disappeared. Erin and I still had work to do if we were going to have any kind of relationship at all. Not because everything was perfect. There would always be challenges, disappointments, moments when I'd have to choose between other people's approval and my own truth. I felt lighter because I'd finally understood something fundamental. Love wasn't about being perfect or deserving or earning your place at the table. Love was about showing up as yourself, flawed, striving, real, and choosing to build something beautiful with another person who was doing the same thing. Daniel had loved me through years of self-doubt and family drama. Jessica had loved me through bad haircuts and worst boyfriends and that terrible phase in college when I thought I might be a poet. My parents, in their imperfect way, had loved me even when they didn't understand my choices. And maybe, eventually, Erin and I could find our way back to loving each other too. Not the competitive, conditional love we'd grown up with, but something truer and kinder. But most importantly, I was finally learning to love myself the way Daniel loved me, completely, without reservation, scars and all. As the evening wound down and our guests began to make their way home, I found myself feeling not tired, but energized. This was my life now. Not the fairy tale I had imagined as a little girl, but something better. Something real. Daniel appeared at my side with my wrap and a knowing smile. Ready to start our happily ever after, Mrs. Hayes? Mrs. Hayes. I tried the name on for size and found it fit perfectly. Ready, I said, taking his offered arm. And for the first time in my life, I truly meant it.